Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4, playing some more World of Warships Legends. Today we're here to actually talk about a special event that is currently going on, Saving Transylvania. This event is a special Halloween mode for World of Warships Legends, where a group of 5 intrepid ships face off against ghastly artificial intelligence in Zikazas as they escort the Transylvania to a portal. When you near that portal, the boss spawns, the dreaded Rasputin. So description aside, I'm going to talk about this video in segments, and I will leave an index below regarding the different sections of the video in case you want to jump around, but in general they will go in this order. First, we're going to talk about the rewards for winning. Then we're going to talk about the general overview of how you play this. That's going to include a little bit of a critique about how this could be made better. Then we're going to go individually through the different ships. So we'll talk about the destroyer, the blade strategy, then we'll talk about the cruiser, which is your Igor strategy, and finally the battleship, the Jackal strategy. Though it might seem to be putting the cart in front of the horse, talking about what you can get if you actually complete the mission before we actually talk about how to complete it, I like to think of this as the incentive portion of this program. Finishing with 3 or 4 stars is relatively easy compared to previous versions of this event on PC, but finishing with all 5 is still pretty difficult. In any case, the primary objective is that the Transylvania must get to the portal. After that, there are 5 secondary objectives that determine how many stars you get. They are, in order of difficulty, destroy the Rasputin, destroy all enemy ships, destroy all catapults, get the Transylvania to the portal with at least 50% of its hit points, and get the Transylvania to the portal without it ever stopping. Now, there are a couple of ways that the Transylvania might stop. One is that there are no allies within the ring around the Transylvania, and the second is that an enemy ship has entered the ring around the Transylvania, which will cause it to immediately stop. Depending on how many of these objectives you complete, you will be rewarded with 1 to 5 stars, and the first time you complete each different level of star, you will get the following reward. For 1 star, you will get 5 of these green Halloween skins, which are effectively Type 4 camo. For 2 stars, 3 days of premium time, which I'm actually really happy to see, particularly because I am probably going to be live streaming this event on Friday, and that means anybody who joins me for that and actually gets at least 2 stars, which ought to be pretty easy, will get the weekend premium for free, if they haven't done it before. If you finish with 3 stars, you're going to get a Halloween crate. With 4 stars, you're going to get 3 more Halloween crates. And finally, if you finish with all 5 stars, you will receive 3 universal commendations. The Halloween crates each have a pretty nice assortment of camos, boosters, and the ordinary sort of stuff. You also have the chance to earn skins for the St. Louis and the Isukaze. In this case, they're nice to have, but the big bonus here is that you're trying to get those universal commendations, which you can use to advance your commanders through their legendary ranks. As we move into strategy, we're probably going to do the major do's and don'ts of this mission. So first, do set your captain skills. It may not be obvious when you load up, but there are 3 Halloween captains, 1 for each type of ship, and you're going to want to select some skills before you get going. If you want my opinions on what those skills should be, you can jump to any one of the sections to see my opinion on what abilities help what captains the most in this event. Do stay with the Transylvania. There is in fact a large ring in the game that is trying to tell you how important this ship is. You should do your very best to listen to the game here because it's not trying to trick you. Honestly, 90% of this particular event is keeping ships inside of this ring. If all 5 ships stay with the Transylvania, either inside the ring or at least very close to it, then you have a really good chance of passing this with several stars. I have yet to see a team that is had all 5 people stick with the Transylvania and lose, though I'm sure it's possible. And the ships that they've selected for this game are actually really good at this mission by design, because they have guns just all over the place. The Igor is a St. Louis, which has a gun, like every 3 feet? And the Jackal is based on the Nassau, which has 6 turrets, evenly distributed around the ship. Staying in the circle is actually not that hard, because these 2 ships basically have a gun pointed at an enemy, whether you're trying to do so or not. So there shouldn't be a lot of reason to maneuver outside of it. Do aim at the base of catapults. Why not the top part? Well, it's a lot easier to hit the base. Also, depending on your range, your targeting system is going to naturally target the base. And even though it sometimes doesn't look like you're going to hit, you usually will. And it's just easier to hit the base than any other part of these catapults. On the other hand, do not wander off. I know this is kind of the flip side of the coin of do stay with the Transylvania, but there are no magic chests in the far corners of this map that you can open. That's actually most of it, though. Without getting into the particulars of each ship's responsibility, the game is trying to encourage you to do just this by granting you a small heal to anyone who is inside of the Transylvania circle. This heal is not a huge deal for battleships, but it actually does heal a decent amount for cruisers, and it's very considerable considering the low hit points that the destroyers have. The heal is going to replenish around 40 health every tick. That's pretty nice. For destroyers, you don't actually need to worry about even being on fire while you're inside of this ring, as long as there aren't multiple fires burning you all at once. One other thing you want to also not do is take the long way around the island. This is another way of saying stay with the Transylvania. Please. You are going to be able to shoot all of the catapults from the route the Transylvania takes without taking yourself out of the game for several minutes. There are only 5 of you, and your team is really going to need everybody working together in order to get this done with 4 or 5 stars. Essentially, if the Transylvania goes left, most of the enemies are going to spawn from the left. If the Transylvania goes right, then most of the enemies are going to spawn from the right. It's best to prioritize the ships that you want to shoot at in terms of their range from the Transylvania, in part because this means that you have a better chance of hitting them and damaging them, but also if they do make it inside of that ring, they are going to stop the Transylvania in its tracks, and you'll lose a star right there. To mention a few things about this campaign that are a bit different than on the PC, for those of you who are familiar with the PC event, ships don't spawn behind you, which is kind of good. This should make it easier because it doesn't entice your teammates to go wander off and fight them, but for some reason they kind of do anyway sometimes. Shooting the Zekas in the mouth doesn't seem to be a weak spot as it has been on the PC. I've tried it a lot. Sometimes it works, but not really. I'm not getting a lot of really good results with that. And I think maybe sometimes I'm just overmatching its bow. Being hit by catapults is a surefire way to be set on fire, but it doesn't seem to do as much damage as on the PC version by a considerable amount. In terms of things that I would like to be slightly different about this campaign, if anyone from Wargaming happens to be watching, it seems to me that the rewards for playing this particularly over and over and over again seem a little slim. I think that kind of leads to all the people who know what they're doing getting this out of the way pretty quick, and then all the people who are totally lost struggling later on. And then really the only other thing is that the lighting for this is just a little bit too bright, which, I mean, it isn't a big deal. It just changes the ambiance of the actual battle, and it would be really nice if this was a very dark map and very spooky and Halloweeny. So hopefully, if this is offered again in the future, we can turn the brightness down a good bit and make this a very scary adventure. Otherwise, I do like this event, and like I said, I do intend to do a live stream, and that will probably be on Friday. I hope to be joined by 1 or 2 other people, so probably Savo and or JC, if they can stand playing this anymore. And hopefully we'll go through this quite a few times, help a few people win some rewards, then do the Q&A and, just have a good time. So now we're going to go on and talk about what you want to do as different ships. First, the destroyer, the Blade. If you want to play the Blade, your primary responsibilities are as follows. You need to torpedo everything. You might be surprised to find out that your torpedo reload is actually very fast, around 16 seconds, and you can actually get that number even lower depending on what skills you take. You are particularly fast compared with everything else in the game, so it doesn't hurt to be a little in front of everybody else. When I say a little bit, I do mean towards the front of the Transylvania circle, or maybe just a little bit beyond that, but don't go too far because you definitely don't want to get into gun duels with Zakazas, and you will start to draw all of the catapult's fire. That can have a negative effect on your hit points pretty quickly. Also, since you are the fastest, you do want to make sure to respond to different ships as they get closer to the Transylvania, and make sure to torpedo them a lot so that they don't enter that circle. Your second responsibility is really just smoke up the Transylvania towards the end of the game. I will encourage you to otherwise use smoke only very sparingly, but this is helpful because if you lay smoke for the Transylvania herself, around the time that you spawn the Rasputin, then you'll be saving a lot of hit points for the Transylvania. You can do this in one of two formations, either by driving in a straight line in front of the Transylvania and laying a trail for her to follow. This is probably the better choice because more often than not, you're going to be playing with people that you might not be able to count on to make good decisions. But you can also try to draw a line in front of the Transylvania around halfway between the two major ships. That will help everyone out if you do it right, but it is harder and it is riskier since you'll be exposing yourself to a lot of damage from the Rasputin and its two Zakazas. I personally wouldn't worry too much about your guns, if at all. They can hardly damage catapults at all, and they have a 0% fire chance out of the gate. As far as how to equip the ship, you can put Aiming System Mod 1 onto it. I wouldn't take main battery modification because there's no significant benefit here, but honestly, if you wanted to run this without any equipment, you would probably be fine too. Your commander is Abraham V. Helsinger, and on the screen you can see my favorite loadout for him. He is a special level 16 commander for this particular mission, and you will want to make sure to select some skills before using the blade for the first time. Truth be told, if I could change anything here, I might choose all of the same abilities but not choose anything for my second skill, mostly because I don't particularly care for the drawbacks associated with either one of them. But as it is, I think this one is the better choice. So like I said, you can pretty much choose whatever you want here, but I would make a few polite suggestions. Observant Rage, Mortar, and Twist and Track are all gunnery skills. They aren't going to be very useful to you in this particular event because the guns on your ship are pretty useless. So I think you'd have better luck choosing other things. I would suggest if you're going to use Fragile Threat in the second slot, you may also want to consider using Leviathan for your legendary skill, largely because these can kind of offset each other. The alternative to Leviathan is Rather Be Torching, but keep in mind this will only increase your fire chance to 3%, which really means that if you set something on fire, it's really more of a fluke than a meaningful event in the game. Next, we're going to be coming to the Igor. Like I said before, this is modeled off of the St. Louis hull, so it has a ram bow and some paddles on the side. And overall, I think this might be my favorite looking ship in the event since they have replaced the smokestacks with these nifty Tesla coil looking things, and somehow that makes the ship go. It's best not to think about how this all works, but if you're playing the Igor, your responsibilities are essentially set everything on fire. The Igor is blessed with a 45% chance to start fires right out of the gate, which means that you hardly have to hit things more than a couple times before they're set ablaze. Use this to your advantage. Typically, enemy Zakazas will spawn in groups of 2 to 4 ships. I would shoot one volley at one, then shoot another volley at another ship, Since these are AI opponents, they will use their damage control as soon as they've been caught on fire one time, which we, as wise and judicious humans, know is not always the best idea. Once a Zikaza has used its damage control, set him on fire again, and that fire will stick for about a minute. Perhaps you can even set him on fire several times, and this will help your team burn down all of the enemies, literally, in as fast a way as possible. Will also help your teammates, like those in the Blade. They may appreciate you more even if they don't realize it, since the enemy ships do take flooding damage as well. So for the most part, you are going to want to stick with HE most of the game, and as long as you're making sure that everyone is on fire and having a good time, you'll be doing your part for your team. You can also use AP on Zikazas if they turn broadside to you, but once they start angling, you'll get a decent amount of bounces and shatters pretty quick, regardless of what skills you choose. Number 2, stay with the Transylvania. So you are probably the most capable ship of actually moderating your speed and position, while also probably being the least important in terms of spike damage to the enemy. You do damage over time. My suggestion is that you make a habit, particularly in the Igor, of shooting a volley and then checking your position after each shot to make sure you aren't tending towards one of the outside parts of the circle. Since you're a St. Louis, you don't have to maneuver your ship very much to have several guns capable of shooting any target, regardless of where that target is. And then a note, if things aren't really going well for your team or somebody's making some bad decisions, shoot the enemy towers. Should you find yourself on an unlucky team where the Jackal is not doing its job on your team, you are capable of doing a decent amount of damage to catapults. This is really the only circumstance that I would really recommend loading over to AP, because the AP damage against catapults is actually pretty good from the Igor. As for equipment, you have the choice between main battery mod, secondary mod, or aiming system mod 1. I would highly suggest using aiming system mod 1, though secondaries are more useful in this scenario in Legends than they were on the PC. The Igor simply doesn't have enough guns to warrant any effort in the secondary department. Aiming system mod 1 will help you actually hit what you're aiming at more often, and that is the clear best choice for the Igor. Your commander for the Igor is this fairly freaky looking fella, the F. Einstein. On the screen, you'll see my favorite loadout for him. You'll notice this is basically a survivability build. You do get a heal, but you only get the one heal, so you'll probably want to use that wisely. Again, you don't need to worry so much about being caught on fire if it's just one time, as long as you stay within the Transylvania's healing aura. A build like this will help you weather a little bit more damage because the Zikazas and catapults shoot HE at you, essentially. I will note, however, that none of these choices are really all that bad. What you don't need too much of is range, fire chance, or AP penetration. Why? Mostly because everything is probably going to be pretty close to you. Your fire chance starts out at an absurd 45% already, so getting it to 48% isn't all that much different. And the AP penetration boost that you get with punching through isn't all that useful in general, and since you should probably be using mostly high explosives, it's best just not to tempt yourself. I would strongly suggest Fixated though, because it's a great ability, and Refill Station is, in general, significantly more useful than by the book, unless you've wandered off somewhere and are on fire a lot. In other words, probably not playing the game right. Last but not least, we come to the Jackal. This one, of course, is modeled after the Nassau. As a battleship in this event, you have a few simple tasks, but before I tell you about them, I will draw your attention to the fact that your turrets rotate much faster in this event than they do in the normal game. Don't get too excited though, because the extra turret rotation came at the expense of your rudder, which is a slovenly plank of wood at the back of your ship that only suggests in the most lazy manner which direction your ship should go. For that reason, I would suggest if you're playing the Jackal, you settle for mostly driving in straight lines for this event. You're going to bleed a lot of speed just like you do in the Nassau normally anytime you try to turn, and since you are an assault, you pretty much have a gun pointed in any direction anyway. So what are you supposed to do for your team? First and foremost, you are here to destroy catapults. Your AP will do just tons of damage to enemy catapults, and you have the best range in order to do so. This will help keep the HP of your teammates up, keep them alive, and keep the Transylvania in good shape. Your secondary objective is to shoot enemy ships. Again, you do have a gun pointed in just about every direction, so I suggest you make only minor course corrections wherever possible, and be happy for whatever guns you can get pointed in the right direction. Since you do have so many guns and they are pointed in so many different directions, oftentimes you can find situations where you can shoot over both your port and your starboard side just by looking left and right. And that should help increase your efficiency if you really want to do that. That's a better choice than maneuvering a lot. Your best bet is to stay on AP and to shoot ships that are providing the best angle, though you should still prioritize shooting ships that are closer to the Transylvania if at all possible. Towards the end of the game, when the Rasputin spawns, you probably want to try to get between the Rasputin and the Transylvania. The Rasputin seems to like to target things that it gets close to, and that means that your job here is actually just to play rope-a-dope for the team. Doing so is greatly helped by angling your ship correctly and also the commander choices you can make. We'll get to that in just a moment. As far as other strategy, the Rasputin does technically take ram damage, and you can do a good chunk of damage if you ram the stupid thing. It is actually pretty challenging to do in the Jackal just because your rudder is so worthless, but if it comes right down to it and you manage to pull this off, there are times that ramming is a reasonable option if you have that available to you. Consider it if all else fails. I have also seen some people suggest that you ram the front of the Rasputin or get the Rasputin to ram you rather, and that will slow it down quite a bit and maybe keep it out of the Transylvania's circle. For equipment, you are again given the choice between main battery mod 2, secondary mod 2, or aiming system mod 1. Aiming mod is a reasonable choice, but secondary mod 2 actually works pretty well also, just because of the number of secondaries the Jackal has. For those of you wondering how much damage the secondaries do, anything that registers as a hit does around 190 damage, but it is not uncommon for them to do upwards of 1300 either. So they can add to your damage in a pretty considerable way while you're also dealing with other targets. As for your commander, you're looking at one of two layouts I prefer. I actually can't make up my mind about this fully because the second slot is a bit of a conundrum to me. In any case, I can tell you that you probably want to use either Aladad or Porcupine. As much as gyrating drill bits might seem like a good choice here, the penalty I find to your speed actually makes this a little too easy to find yourself out of position. For slot 1, I could see an argument for a good day's work, but Flammable Cannoneer provides you a lot more benefit, even if it does make your ship a little bit more susceptible to fire. You can mitigate that somewhat by taking the Firefighter perk rather than Marksman, and that gets rid of most of the disadvantage and even limits the number of fires that can be burning on your ship at one time. I think that actually makes a little bit more sense than Marksman, considering the ranges involved in this encounter, and also considering that your rudder shift on this ship is something that only a masochist could really enjoy. Making it any worse is almost unfathomable. Brawler is probably not a great choice just because of the ranges that the catapults can fire, and since your main purpose on the team is, strangely, not direct damage, but rather getting rid of those catapults and taking hits, I probably just wouldn't use it. In any case, I would strongly suggest Master Mechanic and Will to Rebuild, and I found that that works pretty well for me, regardless of what you choose for slot 2. In any case, I do wish you guys luck. I hope those of you who are really interested join me next Friday for my stream, where we run through this event a couple times. I'm thinking at least 6 times. But anyway, I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you guys on the next one.